The chilling wind of the San Francisco Bay cuts through the thickest coats. Out in the churning dark water sits a rock that served as the ultimate cage for the most dangerous men in the United States. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary was designed to be inescapable. It was a fortress of concrete and steel, surrounded by freezing currents and hungry sharks. Yet on a foggy night in June 1962, 3 men dared to challenge the impossible. They vanished into the gloom and left behind a mystery that continues to baffle investigators and historians alike. Did they succumb to the merciless depths of the ocean, or did they successfully pull off the greatest prison break in history? This is the story of the one escape that might have actually worked. To understand the magnitude of this escape, one must first understand the terrifying reputation of the rock. Alcatraz was not just a prison, but a psychological weapon used by the government against organized crime. It housed notorious figures like Al Capone and Machine Gun Kelly. The daily routine was strictly regimented, and silence was enforced for long periods. Inmates could see the lights of San Francisco twinkling just over a mile away. It was a cruel reminder of the freedom they had lost. The water temperature rarely rose above 55 degrees Fahrenheit. The currents were strong enough to drag a strong swimmer out to sea in minutes. The psychological torture of seeing life go on so close, yet so far away, broke the spirits of many hardened criminals. Frank Morris was the architect of the plan. He was a career criminal who had spent a lifetime in and out of correctional facilities. Morris possessed a superior intelligence with an IQ, reportedly, in the top 2% of the population. He was an orphan who learned to survive by his wits and his ability to manipulate the system. By the time he arrived at Alcatraz in January 1960, he was already a seasoned escape artist. He observed every detail of the prison routine and the structural weaknesses of the aging building. Morris was quiet and calculating. He did not make idle threats or boast about his abilities. He simply watched and waited for the perfect opportunity to strike. Joining Morris were the Anglin brothers named John and Clarence. These 2 men were bank robbers from Georgia who preferred to use toy guns during their heists to avoid hurting anyone. They were skilled swimmers and adept at improvisation. They had a history of escaping from other prisons, which is exactly why they were sent to the supermax security of Alcatraz. The brothers were inseparable and fiercely loyal to one another. They were placed in cells adjacent to Frank Morris and another inmate named Alan West. Together, this group of 4 began to formulate a plan that was so audacious and complex, it seemed destined to fail. They knew that if they were caught, the consequences would be severe, but the lure of freedom was too strong to resist. The prison building itself was slowly crumbling due to the salt air and neglect. The utility corridors behind the cells were unguarded and filled with pipes and ducts that led to the roof. Morris discovered that the ventilation grills in the back of their cells were not as secure as the guards believed. The concrete around the grills was soft and brittle from years of moisture. If they could widen the opening, they could crawl into the utility corridor. From there, they could climb the pipes to the top of the cell block. It was a narrow path to freedom, but it was the only one they had. The plan required patience and silence as they chipped away at the walls right under the noses of the guards. The inmates had to create their own tools from whatever scraps they could steal or scavenge. They used metal spoons stolen from the dining hall and filed them down into sharp picks. They scavenged a motor from a broken vacuum cleaner to build a makeshift drill. This drill was a masterpiece of prison engineering, but it was too loud to use freely. They had to time their work to coincide with the music hour, when inmates were allowed to play instruments. The sound of accordions and harmonicas masked the scratching and grinding of their work. Night after night, they labored in the cramped darkness of their cells. They hid the holes they were making with cardboard replicas of the grills, painted to look like the real thing. One of the biggest challenges was hiding their absence during the night counts. The guards checked the cells periodically throughout the night to ensure every prisoner was in his bed. To solve this problem, the men decided to create dummy heads. They used a mixture of soap and toilet paper and concrete dust to sculpt realistic human faces. They painted the faces with supplies from the prison art kit and applied real human hair collected from the floor of the barbershop. These dummy heads were placed on the pillows, with blankets arranged to look like a sleeping body. In the dim light of the corridor, the deception was perfect. The guards would walk past the cells and see nothing amiss. Reaching the water was only half the battle. Surviving the freezing bay was the true test. They needed a boat, but they had no wood or canvas. Their solution was ingenious. They collected over 50 rubber raincoats, which were issued to inmates. They stole them or traded for them with other prisoners. Inside the secret workshop, they set up in the utility corridor, they stitched the raincoats together. They used steam from the radiator pipes to seal the seams and glue stolen from the glove shop to reinforce the bonds. They built a 6 by 14-foot inflatable raft and life preservers. They even fashioned wooden paddles from scrap lumber. It was a desperate vessel, but it was their only hope of crossing the treacherous mile of water. On the night of June 11, 1962, everything was ready. The men waited until lights out to make their move. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers successfully removed their fake grills and squeezed into the utility corridor. However, the fourth member of the group, Alan West, ran into trouble. The cement around his grill had hardened, and he could not dislodge it in time. He frantically struggled to break through, but the others could not wait for him. With heavy hearts, Morris and the Anglins made the decision to leave West behind. It was a fatal blow to West, but it likely saved the others from being discovered. The three men climbed the plumbing pipes 30 feet up to the ceiling. Once they reached the top of the cell block, they forced open a ventilation shaft that led to the roof. The noise of the shaft popping open echoed loudly, but miraculously, no guards raised an alarm. They crept across the roof, carrying their heavy raft and gear. They had to avoid the sweeping beams of the searchlights from the guard towers. They moved like shadows in the night. They descended a 50-foot pipe on the outside of the building to reach the ground. Then they cut through the barbed wire fences and made their way to the blind spot on the northeast shore of the island. The fog was thick that night, which provided excellent cover, but also made navigation perilous. They inflated their raft with a concertina used as a bellows. At approximately 10 o'clock at night, the three men pushed their makeshift raft into the dark, icy waters of San Francisco Bay. They climbed aboard and began to paddle away from the island. They were aiming for Angel Island, which was 2 miles to the north. From there, they planned to cross Raccoon Straits to the Marin Headlands. The water was calm, but the currents were shifting. As they disappeared into the dense fog, they left the world of incarceration behind. Back in their cells, the dummy heads slept peacefully on their pillows. The guards continued their rounds, completely unaware that the most secure prison in the United States had just been breached. The men were gone, and the silence of the night swallowed them whole. The morning of June 12 began like any other day at Alcatraz. The guards initiated the morning roll call, expecting the prisoners to stand by their cell doors. When Morris and the Anglin brothers failed to rise, the guards shouted for them to wake up. One guard reached through the bars to shake a sleeping inmate, only to have the head roll off the pillow and crash onto the floor. The shock was absolute. The alarm was sounded, and the prison went into immediate lockdown. The dummy heads stared up at the stunned guards with their painted eyes. It was a moment of humiliation for the prison administration. The search began instantly, but the birds had already flown. The cells were empty, and the holes in the walls were exposed. The Federal Bureau of Investigation and the Coast Guard launched one of the largest manhunts in history. Helicopters scoured the coastline and boats crisscrossed the bay. Soldiers from nearby military bases were called in to search the land. They checked every inch of Alcatraz Island, hoping the men were simply hiding in a cave or a tunnel. But there was no sign of them. The authorities expanded the search to Angel Island and the Marin Headlands. They set up roadblocks and distributed photographs of the escapees to every police station in the country. The public was captivated by the audacity of the escape. Tips and sightings poured in from all over the region, but most turned out to be false leads or dead ends. Despite the massive search effort, physical evidence of the escape was scarce. 2 days after the breakout, a packet of letters belonging to the Anglin brothers was found floating in the bay. Later, a homemade life vest was discovered washed up on Cronkite Beach. It was made from the same raincoat material used for the raft. A few weeks later, a Norwegian freighter reported spotting a body floating in the ocean about 20 miles past the Golden Gate Bridge. The description matched Frank Morris, but the body was never recovered. The FBI concluded that the raft had likely failed, and the men had drowned in the cold water. However, without bodies, the case could not be officially closed. Alan West, who had been left behind, became the primary source of information for the authorities. He fully cooperated with the investigators in exchange for leniency. He detailed the entire plan, from the tools they used to the route they took. West explained that the plan was to steal clothes and a car once they reached the mainland. He claimed they were going to separate and lay low for a while. His testimony provided the FBI with a clear picture of how the escape was executed, but it did not answer the ultimate question of whether they survived. Some investigators doubted West, believing he might be protecting his friends or minimizing his own role in the plot. For 17 years, the FBI kept the case open. They chased down thousands of leads across the United States and South America. They monitored the families of the escapees, hoping for a slip-up. But no credible evidence ever surfaced to prove the men were alive. In 1979, the FBI officially closed their investigation and turned the case over to the United States Marshals Service. The official stance was that the men had drowned in the bay. The strong currents and cold temperatures made survival highly unlikely for men on a flimsy rubber raft. The authorities wanted to believe that Alcatraz was still undefeated. But the lack of definitive proof left the door open for speculation. The Anglin family never believed that John and Clarence died that night. For decades, they claimed to have received mysterious phone calls and unsigned cards. Every Christmas, the mother of the Anglin brothers received flowers with no note. When she died, 2 strange men attended her funeral, but disappeared before anyone could speak to them. The family also produced a photograph that they claimed was taken in Brazil in 1975. The photo showed 2 men who looked remarkably like older versions of John and Clarence standing by a termite mound. Forensic experts analyzed the photo and stated that it was highly likely to be the brothers. This evidence reignited public interest in the case. In the year 2013, the San Francisco Police Department received a handwritten letter that shocked the world. The letter began with the words, "My name is John Anglin." The author claimed that he, Frank Morris, and Clarence Anglin had all successfully escaped that night in 1962. The letter stated that Frank Morris had died in 2008 and Clarence in 2011. The author claimed to be 83 years old and suffering from cancer. He offered to turn himself in for medical treatment and a short prison sentence. The FBI analyzed the letter for fingerprints and DNA, but the results were inconclusive. The handwriting was compared to known samples, but no match could be confirmed. Modern science has provided new insights into the escape. A team of researchers from Delft University in the Netherlands used computer models to simulate the tides and currents of San Francisco Bay on the night of the escape. Their findings were fascinating. They concluded that if the men had left between 11 at night and midnight, they would have been swept out to sea and perished. However, if they had left exactly at midnight, the currents would have actually helped them reach the Marin headlands near the Golden Gate Bridge. This narrow window of opportunity aligns with the discovery of the paddle and the life vest. It is scientifically possible that they survived if their timing was perfect. The popular television show Mythbusters also took on the challenge of the Alcatraz escape. They reconstructed the raft using the same materials and techniques as the prisoners. They tested the raft in the bay under similar conditions. The hosts successfully paddled from Alcatraz to the Marin headlands, proving that the raft was seaworthy and the journey was survivable. They concluded that the escape was plausible. While this does not prove that Morris and the Anglins made it, it does debunk the theory that it was physically impossible. The myth of the inescapable prison was shattered by modern experimentation. The legend of the escape grew stronger with every new test. Why did they do it? The risk of death was incredibly high. Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers knew the odds were stacked against them. But for men serving long sentences in a supermax prison, the desire for freedom outweighs the fear of death. Alcatraz was designed to break the human spirit. The escape was an act of defiance against a system that sought to crush them. It was a reclamation of their agency and their humanity. Even if they died in the attempt, they would have died as free men fighting for their liberty. This psychological drive is what makes their story so compelling to audiences decades later. Less than a year after the escape attempt, Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary was closed forever. Attorney General Robert F. Kennedy ordered the closure in March 1963, citing the high cost of maintenance and operation. The escape attempt had undoubtedly tarnished the reputation of the prison. The salt air had corroded the bars, and the concrete making the facility unsafe and expensive to repair. The prisoners were transferred to other federal institutions across the country. The island was abandoned and left to the seagulls and the wind. It became a ghostly reminder of a bygone era of penal history. The closure marked the end of the toughest prison in America. Today, Alcatraz is one of the most popular tourist attractions in San Francisco. Millions of visitors take the ferry to the island every year to walk the halls of the cell block. They can see the cells where Morris and the Anglins lived. The holes in the walls are still there, preserved under glass. The dummy heads have been replicated and placed on the pillows. Visitors can stand at the spot where the men climbed the pipes and imagine the adrenaline of that foggy night. The audio tour narrates the story of the escape, bringing the history to life. The island has transformed from a place of misery into a museum of American history. The United States Marshals Service is the only agency that still actively investigates the case. They have stated that they will not stop looking for the escapees until they are proven dead or reach the age of 99. They regularly release age-progressed images of what Frank Morris and the Anglin brothers would look like today. These images are haunting. They show elderly men with the same distinctive features. The marshals receive tips from time to time, but nothing has led to an arrest. The case file remains open, a testament to the persistence of law enforcement and the enduring mystery of the escape. The escape has left an indelible mark on popular culture. The 1979 film Escape from Alcatraz, starring Clint Eastwood, as Frank Morris, cemented the story in the public imagination. The movie depicted the meticulous planning and the tension of the escape with great accuracy. It portrayed Morris as a brilliant anti-hero fighting against a cruel warden. The film ends ambiguously, leaving the audience to decide the fate of the men. Countless books, documentaries, and TV shows have explored the case. The story appeals to our fascination with the underdog and the perfect crime. It is a real-life thriller that needs no embellishment. The theory that the men fled to South America remains one of the most intriguing aspects of the case. The photograph from 1975 is the strongest piece of evidence supporting this. If they did make it to Brazil, they would have had to live carefully to avoid detection. They would have needed false identities and a way to earn money. It is easy to imagine them living out their days on a farm or a ranch far away from the cold walls of Alcatraz. The idea that they lived full lives in freedom while the FBI hunted them is a romantic notion that many people want to believe. It adds a layer of triumph to the story. There are other theories about what happened that night. Some believe the men had help from the outside. A boat could have been waiting for them near Angel Island. This would explain how they disappeared so quickly without leaving a trace. Others believe they were murdered by criminal associates after they escaped. There are even rumors that the FBI covered up evidence of their survival to avoid embarrassment. Every few years, a new witness comes forward or a new clue is found. But the truth remains elusive. The varying theories only add to the mystique of the case. Everyone has their own opinion on what really happened. As time passes, the likelihood of solving the case diminishes. The witnesses are dying, and the evidence is degrading. If the men are still alive, they would be in their 90s. It is possible that they will take their secret to the grave. Or perhaps a deathbed confession will finally reveal the truth. Until then, the case of the Alcatraz escape remains the most famous cold case in prison history. It is a puzzle with missing pieces, a story with no ending. The file sits in a drawer at the marshal's office, waiting for the final chapter to be written. Beyond the mechanics of the escape, there is a human story of friendship and trust. Morris and the Anglins had to trust each other completely. One slip-up by any of them would have doomed the entire group. They worked in perfect synchronization, driven by a shared goal. The betrayal of leaving Alan West behind must have weighed heavily on them. It was a ruthless decision, made in a moment of panic. The bond between the three escapees was forged in the fire of adversity. Whether they died together in the bay or lived together in exile, their fates were inextricably linked. The legacy of the 1962 escape is profound. It exposed the flaws in the federal prison system and led to major reforms. It showed that no wall is high enough to hold a man who is determined to be free. The story challenges our perceptions of justice and punishment. We find ourselves rooting for the criminals, admiring their ingenuity and courage. Alcatraz stands as a monument to their audacity. The wind still howls through the cell block, and the waves still crash against the rocks. But the ghosts of Morris and the Anglins are gone, leaving only questions in their wake. As the sun sets over the Golden Gate Bridge, the silhouette of Alcatraz darkens against the horizon. The mystery of what happened on that June night endures. Did they beat the odds and find freedom, or did the bay claim them as its own? Perhaps it is better that we never know. The uncertainty keeps the legend alive. It reminds us of the limits of control and the enduring power of the human spirit. The escape from Alcatraz will forever remain the ultimate unsolved puzzle, a story of three men who vanished into the mist and became legends.